Hello, Garland Nixon here with Dr. Jim Kavanaugh. All kind of craziness going on, tariffs, wars, and more wars, and just all manner of foolishness. And we're going to talk about it. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here with Dr. Jim Kavanaugh. Jim Kavanaugh, the polemicist Substack is a place you can find all of his good work. Dr. Jim, welcome back to our humble channel.
Yeah, thank you again for having me, Garland. Always a pleasure.
You know, one thing's interesting, Jim, and that is that for some time, Americans have been, I don't use the word arrogant, maybe unwilling to admit a reality. We watch the Europeans, right? And we're like, these people are mad, right? They're like, oh, yes, we've got to go fight the Russians. And we're like, you got nothing. What are you talking about fighting the Russians? You have like no troops. You got no money. You're broke. Your people are restive. This is insanity. And we watch the Europeans from across the pond like these people have gone nuts, right? And now you look at the US and they're like, we'll fight a tariff war with China. And we're like, yeah, industrial, that's like, it's the equivalent. Having a tariff war with China, to me, is the equivalent of Great Britain saying they're going to have a military conflict with Russia. To me, that's the equivalent of delusion because we don't have the industrial capacity and I'm like, we got to stop laughing at the Brits and the Europeans because our leadership is just as delusional, maybe when it comes to a few different things. Anyway, your thoughts, Jim?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, Trump thinks he's responding to real problems that caused by globalization that everybody was, I quote the famous Ross Perot, I can hear that giant sucking sound when he's talking about NAFTA. And the labor unions said it. Everybody said this is going to cause jobs to go away. Ultimately, one of the effects of quote unquote globalization as managed by the neoliberal elite in the world was a relative deindustrialization of America. But that wasn't China's fault. These were American capitalists who decided to move their production in order to take advantage of low labor costs. This was capitalism doing its thing, finding the best way to suck the wealth that's been created by labor into the pockets of a fewer and fewer people. Now, the Chinese today take advantage of it. Of course, they took advantage of the capitalist, neoliberal, free trade social order that the United States insisted everybody in the world should follow and did follow for 30, 40 years. And during those 40 years, China, developed incredibly, not just because, but they weren't cheating anybody. What they did also, which is the point. Yeah. So, okay, we should bring manufacturing back home, revive some kind of manufacturing economy in the United States. Tariffs alone aren't going to do that. And this stupid tariff policy, this kind of one size fits all algorithm that they put in to decide what tariffs to be on every country is just so stupid. And what we need is to rebuild the American economy on the basis of the production of real goods and services that help everybody in society, that raise the living standards and raise the general prosperity of society. And that's what China has done. And it wasn't by cheat, it was by massive state-directed investment and planning and making sure that there was competition. There's capitalist relations of production in China too, but they have a state-directed plan, and they use their state ability, because the state has unlimited capital in a fiat money economy, to capitalize. We'll build 10,000 miles of or however many miles they have of a high-speed railroad. We'll turn this city and this province into a high-tech, industrialized, producing chips, producing the most. We'll have the most advanced manufacturing capacity in the world, and we'll raise the general level of prosperity for most.
If I may just give an analogy for this, and then you can go on. years ago, I got into like a lot of natural medicine stuff, herbal medicines, the various diets, taking, but okay, many years ago. And what I found out is this: traditional Western medicine is, let's give you a pill, a vaccine, or something, a miracle cure, something that will address this, right? Wherein traditional herbal medicine is like, let's put your body in a state to defend itself. Yeah. Your body has a great immune system. We found out in recent years, vitamin D3, vitamin zinc, a lot of illnesses that people were getting, particularly over the last few years, people have found out, hey, your problem is you're lower on this or that. And if you raise this, you let less chance of getting, whatever, be it COVID, the flu, whatever the case may be, right? Okay. I think it's the same dynamic, because what you're saying to me is this: look, the United States wants reindustrialization. China wanted reindustrialization. Did we give them lots of labor? Yeah. But they said, we got to have a infrastructure that can handle power going to these factories. We got to have roads to move them on. We got to have ports. We have to have an educated populace. Even now, had China not done the investments in their infrastructure, in their people, they couldn't just stick factories in and have a bunch of educated people, no roads to move them on, no ports to move this stuff, no new bridges to go across places. Oh, we're going to mine this stuff in the mountains, but we got no trains to get it out of the mountains. So they built the foundation. The reason their industry is strong is there's a foundation under it. Right now, I bring this up constantly. Okay, tomorrow, a magician can snap their fingers and all 90,000 factories, or however many it was, returned to the U.S., right? I live in the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area. You know what happens when it's 102 degrees and everybody turns on their air conditioners? Brownouts. The electrical infrastructure can't handle it. How are you going to put a bunch of factories in there and turn them all on at the same time to build widgets? You know what I'm saying? And then what's going to happen on our roads around that are packed? How are you going to move this stuff down? Our train tracks were made in the 1940s and 50s. See what I'm saying? So it's thinking, this magical thinking. All I got to do is this, and I can magically return industry that's going to have to buy the machines for these industries from China. There's going to be 4 million% tariffs, and so they can't afford them. And then when they get finished, it's going to cost them $50 to make this product that China can make for $10. So even then, you're not going to be productive on the internet. I mean, you're not going to be competitive. They're not thinking this thing through, Jim.
No, of course they're not. Look, as you say, it requires rebuilding infrastructure. We're behind. And it's come to me over the past year, the extent to which China is the future. I mean, they've rebuilt an enormous infrastructure and a modern infrastructure, highly modernized. And they have factories that are turn the lights on. The entire thing is robotized and automated. And that's a problem. These are problems that we're going to have to face as a society that require, frankly, socialism, socialist policies and socialist attitudes. You don't just stick a tariff on. That's not going to solve the problem. You have the whole entire global, what you like about globalization or not. In fact, any component, any sophisticated product, and not just a sophisticated product in the world, contains elements and components that come from all around the world. And you can't get away from that now. And so you have to begin to deal with that in a way that isn't just looking for short-term profits. Not only did the American capitalists offshore manufacturing, but they turned American capitalism into asset stripping, into buying stuff up and with a lot of debt and asset stripping it and selling off the debt. So there's a whole structure of American capitalism that assets aren't going to solve. And in order to solve the problem, the serious problems that we're facing as a society, in terms of, we now have inequality that's worse than 1789 in France. Okay. So, this is a problem. This is what the social economy for people. You have a society in which people can't afford rent. They can't afford the doctor. They can't afford education. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. And tariffs aren't going to solve that. Okay. You need a widespread social policy that both recreates an American economy that's vibrant and effective for the 21st century, and that enhances the prosperity of all. Okay. Now that's essentially what the Americans are doing, is choosing between socialism and barbarism, and they're choosing barbarism. And what Trump's solutions are to the 21st century problems of globalization are 19th century capitalism. Let's try some 19th century capitalist policies.
At least look at a country that's growing, Russia, a country, right? Okay. They have the legacy of the Soviet Union. Again, I would argue that similar to China, Russia in a way is a mixed economy. You know what I mean? For this reason, the government is in control. Do they have a capitalist element? Large capitalist element, yeah, but the government makes ultimate decisions on stuff. They control it. And what fuels the Russian economy? Two gigantic government companies, Rosneft and Gazprom. Right? So instead of taxing me, if I'm a Russian citizen, to death to do whatever, they've got two gigantic government-owned companies. So that instead of Exxon pumping all the oil out of Pennsylvania, Texas, wherever, and using that money to buy back their own stocks and increase their dividends, Rosneft and Gazprom take all this money and they build stuff. Now, what have they done with military? They have nationalized pretty much their military industrial complex. So now they build everything it costs. You know what I mean? So they have a legacy to look at and say, you have to have some level of government control over things in order to even have a hope of, and let me add this. Here's the problem we have, Jim, even with our discussion, and it's important. We have an economic culture that is toxic, okay? So let's just say, for the sake of purpose, for the sake of argument, these cause money to flow into the hands of the people that own these companies, and there's an incentive for them to build something or other, whatever, right? Here's the problem in America: it's financialized. Every time you put money in the hand of the person who runs Boeing or whatever the hell one company is, they're going to take that money, they're going to buy back their stolen stock, and they're going to artificially inflate the value of their company so they get more dividends and then blah, 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 more stock. And they're going to go out. What else do? They're going to find some other companies to buy up, and they're going to buy up 10 other companies. They're going to take out loans against those companies, bankrupt those companies, and keep the money. So even if Donald Trump's or whoever, the ruling elite, they're doing this, whoever it is, who cares? Even if there was a modicum of reality and effectiveness to this, the economic culture of financialization wouldn't make it work, because that's not what you do on Wall Street. That's not what you do anymore. Those days are over, Jim.
Well, yeah, look, this has to go with the general notion that, money is a social tool to facilitate the production and distribution of real goods and services that will be beneficial to society. Okay. Now, in a capitalist society, all that production and of goods and services is the purpose of that production. The real social purpose of that production is subordinated to the private profit maximizing interests of private individuals and entities that capitalize the industries. Okay. So you have production for purpose subordinated to production for profit. And that's happened more and more that's why we have to control what happens with the money. The money should be a tool. Once you have a society in which the primary economic activity is using money to make more money, you have what every society that's done that has gone into free fall. That is the worst kind. You have to control. We have public banking. People shouldn't be paying 25% for anything. That should be illegal. And you should be illegal to buy. It was illegal to buy back your own stocks. I mean, there are a whole set of what we learned from the fact that letting capitalism run wild like this ends up with crisis. Capitalism produces crises. And we had a gigantic crisis called the Great Depression. And coming out of that, which actually was ended by the war, by the government spending of the war and the government employment, but coming out of that, the smartest capitalist economists said we got to have a set of policies that are going to try to prevent that kind of thing from happening again, because it's inevitable under capitalism. And what the neoliberals and Trump now is doing away with all of the guardrails that help to prevent another Great Depression, but actually have helped to hide since 2008, 2009, since the financial crisis, what Michael Roberts calls the long depression that's been going on, and keep allowing American capitalists to end up to, do these financial games, financial speculation games, and do this stuff with, as you say, buying up countries and selling them off and taking loans. The story of what's happening to Joanne Fabrics now, which is a profitable company, but private equity companies buy things up and do these financial games, taking out a lot of debt on them and selling off the debt through the banks, like they did with the bad mortgage debt. And they're doing that now across the board. Private equity companies are taking. It's not even visible in the stock market. They don't have any public regulation, so it's extremely dangerous. But this is a degradation of the economy, of the post-World War II American capitalist economy that's been going on for 30, 40 years. And you're not going to turn it around by making Lesotho pay 50% tariffs. It's just ridiculous. That's not a policy. It's a joke, and it's a simplistic, simple-minded notion of what you can do to get industrialization back. But we're stuck in this, and it's a very, very bad game, because, as you say, and it's very important, the political education and the political consciousness of society has been terribly formed, absolutely terribly. Everybody's stuck in the Fox to MSNBC loop, and it's terrible, terrible, terrible.
Well, the other thing is this, you can argue all kinds of things that will or won't happen based on your ideology. In America, there's an ideology that says, there's a lot of people that believe, yes, the free markets. Free markets are great, and they don't even understand the fact of the matter is the markets are not free. It's absurd, a claim that the markets are free. The free markets are great, and that all we have to do is, this laissez-faire. In fact, in the 1920s, what did they call it? Laissez-faire capitalism, right? We're going to laissez-faire, leave everything alone. And of course, laissez-faire brought you 1929, right? If you leave everything alone and let the rich people do whatever they want to, somehow, miraculously, they'll just do the right thing and everything will work out, right? I don't know how we get there, but that's supposed to work. And every single time it crashes. What happens in the 1990s? Clinton and the Republicans, Democrats and the Republicans, began unraveling the New Deal banking laws. And once they were able to do that, if people just think about Glass-Steagall, but they were the whole time they were unraveling them. And what do you get? Of course, 2008. And now, as you said, the problem is we get simplistic answers. I remember in the 1980s, you might remember this. Back then you had welfare. Remember that? And this is what you would hear from people. Oh, and I heard this exactly thing. All we got to do is get rid of welfare and it'll straighten everything out, because people would see a downturn starting. Remember when people just said, get rid of welfare, get rid of welfare. And I remember saying, welfare is less than 1% of the budget. How is that going to? It wasn't logical. That was the argument they made. All we have to do is X and it'll fix everything. 1990s come, Democrats wipe out welfare, right? Well, then all we got to do is get rid of fill in the blank. It's always something. Get rid of the immigrants. All we got to do is this. All we got to do is that. Very, very simple answers to complicated questions. And so that's all we have now. We've got a very, very simple answer. The problem is China is in a position to deal with this. I think we got 10%. They're all over the world. So if they lose 10%, yes. Will it hurt them? Yeah. Will it wipe them out? No. But a lot of our states, Walmart, and this is an indictment on our economy, but Walmart is the biggest employer in a lot of states. Amazon's a huge employer. Now it's an indictment on our economy, but they are jobs that people have. They don't pay worth of crap. Okay. Walmart can't continue to operate. Do you have a feeling that I've said this? you know, this is oh, we're going to do this to we're going to do this to rebuild the economy. But here's the other part. What if that ain't it? What if it's like, how can we totally decouple from China in a way that's going to bash the hell out of the American economy, but we can't tell the American people, look, we're going to decouple from China and your ass is going to get slammed. So we say, yes, we're doing this to everybody because this and that. And we're basically decoupling from the world's economic system. Might I add, who created the WTO? Who created we created this entire economic infrastructure, and now we're blaming the economic infrastructure and literally decoupling from it.
Yeah, the United States of America, pushed forward with its European allies the whole globalized neoliberal world economic order that's been built over the past 40 years, right? And now Donald Trump comes in as if he's as if he's somebody who just dropped in from another planet and says to everybody, you're all going to do away with this now because we don't like it. We don't like the results that we created. And gives up any notion of having what I call soft power, you know, talking nicely to people, presenting some things as in a way that sounds like it's reasonable and sounds like it's humanitarian or it's legal or whatever, and just bullying and just coming in and saying, we don't care what you think. We don't care how stupid this. I don't care. I'm not even pretending to recognize that it's more than ironic that as president of the United States, I'm coming in and telling you guys, you gotta change everything that we told you to do. And I'm just kind of going to bully you. And he thinks he can bully. Is this not the end of World War II, when the United States was on top of the world and was, you know, the main manufacturing center of the world? And it's not 1991. It's not the end of the Cold War, when Russia was turned into a shock and awe capitalism that, you know, destroyed the economy. It's not that anymore. It's not 20 years ago when China was still a relatively poor country. This is a different economic world order that we're in, economic and political and military. And in none of those cases is the United States really, are American leaders really psychologically prepared to acknowledge that to themselves. Donald Trump is a bully. The Americans have been bullies for a long time and gotten away with it.
I was going to say, he's the perfect example of actually.
And he doesn't believe that. He thinks he's the toughest kid on the block. And if he wants to end the war, then everybody else has to stop fighting. If he wants to end the globalized economy, then everybody else has to end the globalized economy. And I'm so small, I'm so tough. But Joe Biden couldn't do that, but I'm going to do it. Watch, I'll show you. This is
actually, Jim,
childish bullying.
I would make this argument. I've never seen a more perfect expression of U.S. empire. I've never seen than Donald Trump, right? We go around the world and we say, you can't do this, but we can. You can't say this, but we can. Ooh, how about this? We're getting out of this deal, but we expect you to Iran, but we expect you to maintain the deal. And Joe Biden went along with that too. Why isn't Iran maintaining the deal? Well, Trump dropped out of it. Yeah, but they should still go along with the deal, right? We go around the world, no matter who president. We go around the world and point to what Donald Trump is doing is an open expression. And I think that's the only thing that pisses him out of what the country does. Look, think about this. We lose a war. We attack Russia through Ukraine. We lose the war with Russia. And then we say, you know, Russia, this war needs to be over. And Russia's like, yeah, on our terms. No. Marco Rubio the other day. And Marco Rubio, to me, really expresses the neocons. You know, there's two kinds of neocons. The neocons that say, we got to keep fighting Russia no matter what. You know, the Keir Starmer type neocon. John Bolton, just fight anybody no matter what. But there's another Marco Rubio version of neocon, I think, even then, that's saying, oh, all right, well, this ain't working. Plus, we want to go to war with China. We got wars over here. We might want to attack somebody in South America. Screw this. It didn't work well enough, right? And so Rubio's now saying things like, yes, if the Russians don't accept this in the next few weeks, then we'll know who's at fault here. Wait a minute. You attacked them. You started a war with them. And just like economically, you create an economic infrastructure that is disastrous, and people start build bricks and doing things to get out from under the economic infrastructure that you created because it doesn't work for them either. And they start finding ways to work for them, and you're like, holy crap, it doesn't work for us either. Yeah. Okay, that's it. You guys got to stop. Russia, what? We started a war with you. Oh, crap, you're winning. Okay, you got to stop. So Donald Trump, to me, I see him as a brash, example of, like, okay, we occupy Syria. Well, Trump, Biden, Obama, whoever smiled, we're there to help the poor little dear Syrian people. Trump comes in, we're stealing the oil. Yeah. He's just the open expression of this monster, and he's the more pure expression of it. Yeah. But it's the same thing. And now, here's what happens. When you do that with Libya, you can get away with it. When you do that with Iraq, you can get away with it. But when you go to Russia and say, Russia, we're going to beat you up, you're going to lose that. When you go to China and say economically, but as long as we were kicking around the little kids taking their lunch money, we could get around it. Now, we don't realize now, when we were in middle school, we were taking the money from the sixth graders. Now we're in high school. We're freshmen. We can't take money from the seniors. They're going to beat our ass and send us back home with no lunch money. And that's what we don't get. We're amongst peers and really militarily and economic superiors because they have enough sense to do it right. And we're still pretending like we can push people around. Hey, pretty disastrous move, I might say, Jim.
Yeah, look, you're right. Donald Trump is doing crudely and with contempt, contemptuously treating, talking to people and countries with contempt, what the Democrats and previous, what Obama does eloquently and with graciousness, and and that's the difference, and you see it, and it, fortunately to some extent, seeing that happen it's helping to undermine the American empire. Soft power is real power. When it's combined with hard power, it's real power. When you just give up the soft power and depend on the hard power, you're losing power. And especially when you don't have as much hard power as you think you do, as you once did. So you're coming in. These kids weren't the kids that you were pushing around in middle school, as you're saying. They grew up, and they're not gonna back down. China isn't gonna. Economically, really, it's hard to, to overstate, even for me. I mean, over the past year, I've come to learn, because they don't demonstrate that to you in mass media, how powerful economically China is, what they have done, and it is light years ahead of us, and we depend on it in so many ways that we can't even, people just have no clue about. And so the idea that you're going to intimidate China into backing off, or what? China, I think, has maybe 20% of people think it's a big export economy. It's really like 25% of their economy is export. And some percentage of that is to the United States. And guess what? They have other things, and they have resources, and they have manpower, and they have, as you say, an educated population. And so we think we're punishing everybody else in the world. What Trump is doing is further isolating the United States and self-punishing, and he doesn't even realize it. And it's going to come as the shock is going to be felt by the American people, and I think by American capitalists, who are not going to like what's going on. And that's going to be, those are the ones who are going to be the first ones to come after Trump. And if they'll get some courage. But the long-term problem, the thing that makes me so frustrated is that, the American people and the political consciousness doesn't make it easy. It makes it very hard for people to see the way out of this. Anything that would be the way out of it. They're going to jump back to the Democrats, who are going to, have, as the Republicans had correct criticism of the Democrats are going to have correct criticism of the Republicans. And the political, this is the real problem, that the political, ideological, social controls of American society, and they are controls, makes it very difficult, nearly impossible for a political movement to develop which has another kind of perspective, that would be actually helpful. And we're stuck in that. And it's very, very depressing because Trump's administration is going to do a lot of damage and it won't all be undone. And, you know, again, we overestimate the extent to which things like the Constitution and the courts and the Congress, these institutions were created. The Constitution is not, you know, the democratic thing that people think it is. And there are laws on the books. The Supreme Court just, you know, validating this Alien Enemies Act from 1790, whatever, that law is on the books. It's been on the books. And so he can do that. You know, the Korematsu law, the law that Roosevelt used to detain and put Japanese into concentration camps, that was approved by the Korematsu decision by the Supreme Court. That's on the books. So there are things here that the executive can do, and that he can play with and push his power to the limit. And some of the limits haven't been explored, and he's going to have the ability to do some things. And when the Democrats come in, they're not giving you health care. They're not giving you a $20 an hour minimum wage. They're not going to control interest rates. They're not going to give you housing and health care guarantees. This is what we need to do. They're not going to end foreign wars. They're certainly not going to end support for Zionism, which is, you know, nothing has destroyed the standing of America in the world more than its support for Zionism, which is demonstrated itself to be the enemy of humanity and to be a fascistic, racist exceptionalism that, you know, is slaughtering people deliberately en masse for the sake of driving them out. And the Americans, again, Donald Trump is crudely and, you know, contemptuously saying, yeah, I'll come in and I'll take over Gaza. We'll do this for you. Whereas, you know, Obama and Clinton and Biden, they and Blinken, et cetera, they did it behind the screen of, oh, we're really concerned for the Palestinians. We're going to give the same bombs and the same rockets to Israel to kill them, and we're not going to stop the Israelis from doing anything they want, but we're going to talk nice about it. So that's the difference, and and everybody sees this now. The United States empire has exposed itself, as you say.
Well, you know,
in every way.
to take that to run with that also. Look, the U.S. was like, yes, we're going to compete with Russia and China in Africa. We're going to compete with Russia. You know, there's all of these important blah blah blah, right? One of the things, and I'll add the Democratic Party to that, because the Russians, the Republicans don't even try to pretend like they're, you know, balanced when it comes to Zionism and Israel. The Democrats claim some moral high ground when it comes to everything. But this moral debacle of Zionism and of the, you know, what's happening in Gaza, and just continually to spread this into a greater war, to attack the Houthis, is, you know, they, in my opinion, valiantly push back against what's going there as best they can, has wreaked you know, terrible moral result. Any thoughts of the global South? Oh, we'll go over there and make friends. Remember, Biden was going over to global. Oh, yes, we're going to make friends. We're going to build a railroad or something in Ghana. You know, the bull crap that they were doing, performative stuff, like we could compete with China. If you remember, Biden was coming up with this $550 million or $1 billion, whatever they were claiming that they were going to get with the Europeans. Remember that? Don't remember the exact number. And they were saying, we're going to go to Africa and build all this infrastructure. We'll compete with China, blah, 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 right? Number one, they weren't going to do that. The money would be laundered into the hands of American corporations or whatever, and, you know, British, but then they'd steal all the stuff. But here's the point. Now the Africans, everyone just looks at the U.S. and says, what you guys are doing in Gaza? Really? Now, South Africa, the U.S. is like in this moral war with South Africa. South Africa's like, that's wrong, and we're going to try to do what we can in the International Criminal Court, which, of course, is a joke. But at least they're doing something. They're making a move to try to stop it. You've got other countries saying we're going to join. You got all these African countries saying, oh, well, you know. So you've got this moral failure here, this moral debacle that around the world, any thought that, okay, we're going to make friends with this country. We're going to say to this country, China's bad or Russia's bad, and we're the good guys. What Zionism has done is exposed the world to look and say, well, crap, you did it in Indonesia, you did it in Vietnam, you did, and on and on and on and on. You guys have, don't tell us you changed. You haven't changed. The ruling elite of the US and Europe, Western ruling elite, are a bunch of damn fascist, murdering, genocidal bastards. And they've just, this is like, they finally exposed themselves for that. And might I add, but I'll finish with this. There's a lot of people in America. The Democrats think they can just scream, oh, Trump's bad. If you look at the numbers, their numbers ain't coming back. You know what I mean? It's not Trump's numbers going down. The Democratic's numbers are at rock bottom. I just saw the other day, 69% of Americans opposed him. A lot of former Democrats, particularly the young people, a lot of people of color, are like, we hate Trump, we hate Trump. You guys are committing genocide. We're done with you. So I don't know where we go from here, but they have been, I keep using this word, morally discredited. And I don't know what happens as a result of that here, but it creates massive instability. And this idea that we can reindustrialize, there's a lot of countries that won't buy a damn thing from us if we didn't. They'd be like, oh, yeah, right. We ain't buying that crap. What do you think? Muslim countries are going to buy stuff from us? I don't think so.
Well, they may. A lot of them are bought off. But yeah, definitely. This is the American empire, the aura of virtue that people like Obama, generated around the American empire. People like John F. Kennedy, people like, this notion that, we're the city on the hill, we're the most advanced, we're a democracy, we're, we stand for human rights and international. That is gone. Okay. I don't see how anybody can put any pretense of that, including the Democrats. Once you support, as Biden did, completely what the Israelis are doing in Gaza, and which is what the Israelis did in 1948 in order to establish the Jewish supremacist state of Israel and the Zionist project, which the Americans have been supporting for 80 years. Everybody realizes now that was done as if that was a good thing, as if this was a wonderful thing to be supporting the establishment of a Jewish state in the middle. No, it wasn't. It was a vicious colonial enterprise that was premised and made possible by, in 1946 to 48, the killing and expelling of 80% of the population. What you're watching now is what happened then, and that's what made possible the establishment of the state of Israel. And it's been pursued at a slower pace, at a gradual pace, but every once in a while with an eruption of sudden and massive violence. And this is the end story of that. Israel is saying, and Zionism is saying, we're going to finish. We're finished pretending that there's an aura of virtue about us. We're just going to accuse everybody who's against us of being evil, anti-Semitic, but we're going to go be the most cruel, sadistic, fascist force that I think any of us have seen in our lives, any living person, besides maybe my 97-year-old father-in-law, but equal or surpassing. I have no hesitation saying this because it's out in the open. When the Allies liberated concentration camps and brought the townspeople in from around to see what was going on, they were ashamed. They were trying, we didn't know this was happening. Nobody in Israel can say that, and nobody in the Western world can say that. The Israelis are saying, we know what we're doing, and we're doing it. We know we're slaughtering children and doctors and teachers and the journalists, and we're doing it deliberately. So this is something that's horrifying. And, again, the country, and it's not just the United States is completely and 100% involved in this. It makes it happen. It's impossible to do without the Americans. They could put a stop to it when they wanted, and they're going full force with it, and even getting ahead of them. So this has destroyed any aura of virtue that the American and the Western project as a whole. Because as you say, the European countries are doing this. It is absolutely 100% clear that if these were that they do not consider the Palestinian people and Palestinian children to be fully human, to be as fully human as they consider the rightful, the fully human Jewish settlers who are coming from Western countries. So, this is racism, in the largest sense of the word. It's ethno-supremacism of a horrible kind. And you can't pretend that it is. I mean, they can and they do, or they just ignore it. But the rest of the world whatever's happening in the United States and Europe, and it's given rise. Now, I just saw it today, for the first time, the majority of Americans think badly of Israel for the first time. And that there's been and that's what they're doing. That's why the repression, because there was a growth over the past year and a half of an anti-Zionist movement. Finally, Jewish kids in the vanguard of these student movements saying, we reject Zionism, we see what it is, and we reject it. This is an anti-Zionist movement that I had despaired that we'd ever see, and it came about because what Israel has done, and what the United States and Israel have done, not because some outside force came in and ginned this up. This is that people seeing and realizing what Israel has done, but they are now, and they're going full on. They want to stop this. They want to try and stop and reverse the development of an anti-Zionist political movement. That's why they're going to deport the whole. We're going to get rid of criminal immigrants has become, we're going to get rid of anybody who's opposed to Zionism. And that's the program of the Trump administration. And they've turned the censorship and anti-free speech gone much further from, we're going to attack people who misinform you. We're going to attack people, and we're going to criminalize people. We're going to censor people. We're going to take away, we're going to control universities so that they cannot have people who speak up in favor of the Palestinian people, because that's supporting terrorism. So supporting terrorism is the new excuse for not only censorship, but criminalization of dissident.
It's the new misinformation. It's the your misinformation. Oh, I'm sorry, Garland Nixon, you've been suspended from Facebook for 60 days for misinformation, disinformation. I literally had a picture of some Ukrainian soldiers with Nazi iconography, around them and things like that, iconography around them. And back when the special military operation started, and Facebook suspended me for 90 days and all this other stuff for misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, all of the above, right? This is an excuse to say we don't want you here, because you're saying things that the government doesn't allow. And the Trump administration came in, oh, that's terrible. All they meant was this. They're doing it for stuff that we're okay with. With the Trump people were like, we're okay if it's like COVID, you could talk about that. If it's whatever, something that we like Ukraine, you should be able to talk about that. We don't want to be in that anyway. Now, people, Israel, well, we agree with the Democrats 100%. And in fact, the Democrats didn't go nearly far enough. When it comes to that, there are no holds barred. We'll take you out. It is, when I look at these things that were going on with the Democrats first, what is it? It is an acknowledgement by the ruling elite that they have contempt for the intellectual capacity of the working class and regular people, right? You do not have the right to question us intellectually, philosophically, or regarding any of our policies. You have no right to question us. And if you question us, we'll just relabel it. It doesn't matter what we call it. Anti-Semitism, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. The Trump administration is doing exactly the same thing the Biden administration. I saw this, and we've discussed that 60 Minutes did that thing in Germany where they were grabbing people, arresting people in the first thing in the morning because they, quote, insulted somebody online. Recently, the British, I forgot, 13,000 people or something that they have arrested. And some sent to jail, some fined because they said something online that the government doesn't like, right? And we're all aghast at that. But look what's happening right here. As of yet, we haven't been as heavy-handed with Americans, that natural-born Americans. Still, Americans are getting deported. But my point is, the foundation of this is what? The ruling elite says, the littles, you people, you better keep your mouth shut. And when we give you a narrative, you better repeat it. You better not question it. It is contempt by the ruling elite. And Donald Trump, people think that a guy who's like a billionaire or whatever, born with all this money, and brings in like the so-called richest man in the world, that somehow they're going to stand, they don't represent the ruling elite. This censorship, to me, censorship against the voices of the people is the ultimate expression of the ruling elite and their contempt for the regular persons. Your thoughts?
Yeah, they're protecting, as you say, the narratives that are important to them and the causes. that are important to them, the things that are happening in the world. Look, the Zionist cause is accepted by the American elite across the board, from Trump to Nancy Pelosi saying, if the Capitol that I'm sitting in burned down to that tomorrow, we'd still be standing with the Israelis. That's more important to us. And, Bill Clinton, the president of the United States, saying, I would pick up a gun and go fight for Israel. He was excoriated by the Americans for trying to avoid the Vietnam draft, but they didn't, by the Republicans. I'm sorry. The Republicans said nothing about it when he said, I will pick up a gun and fight for Israel. We have the Democratic, one of the big prospective Democratic candidates for 2028 is Rahm Emanuel, an officer in the Israeli army whose father was part of the terrorist, avowedly self-described terrorist organization that assassinated the UN media in Palestine. And so it's nothing. And he was this guy became the chief of staff of the president of the United States.
Oh, how about this? He was run out of Chicago as the mayor.
Nobody had batted an eye about that. Can you imagine the chief of staff? If someone who had been in the French army, was devoted to France the way that Rahm Emanuel was devoted to Israel, had tried to become chief of staff of the American, but they would have, the Senate would have been up in arms. What are you talking about? This guy's not, his loyalty isn't to America. So, so we have a Zionist country, and it's embedded since 48. There's been tremendous amount of cultural work that's worked on the American people to make them feel like Zionism is a good thing, and it's really good that we support it. It means we're not anti-Semitic. That's exactly what it is, and therefore we congratulate ourselves for supporting it. And this is now over, I hope, and I think it is. And people are fighting against that. But this is what the Trump administration and the Democrats want to protect. Chuck Schumer said, my job is to keep the left on the side of Israel. And to a certain extent, that's Bernie Sanders' job too. Don't let people wander away and understand that you can't be anti-racist and Zionist. You can't be anti-war and Zionist. You can't be in favor of free speech and Zionist. You can't be America first and Zionist. These are incompatible things. And they're trying to keep the American people from thinking that way. And they're going to do it with repression, with the repression of the federal government that's going to come in from Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and
all of them.
All of them. They're all
Tulsi Gabbard, you name it.
They're doing it now. They're spending all their time and they're announcing it. Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, I'm here to save Israel. I'm here to protect Zionism. They're announcing it. And they're now deporting people who've done nothing, absolutely nothing, but speak up on behalf of the Palestinian people, and they're deporting them.
Sometimes a year ago.
Decades they're deporting them.
Sometimes a year ago.
To Americans.
Yep. Some of the people that you wrote an article a year ago.
Yep.
A year ago that was mildly critical of Israel. That where you went out of your way to make sure that you didn't say anything over the top, and they read it. Oh, you wrote something critical of Israel. But see, part of that is as you know, is the chilling effect.
Exactly.
Not only do they want to go see, people are like, they went after somebody who wrote an article, an article a year ago that was approved by everybody, that sat there, nobody said a word, and it sat there for a year, and they came in and slammed them. Exactly why they did it.
Yep.
Exactly why they did it. What they want to do is take somebody for something minor and blow it up and crush them. That way, everybody around looks at it and says, "Oh my God!"
I better be careful.
I had when I was in law enforcement, we had a new superintendent, and he and I were really good friends. And he knew the game. He was a real slick guy, right? He was really funny. He was really a kind of easygoing, nice guy. But he always says, "I know how cops think." You know what I mean? And you gotta. So he came in and he roared and he read. Let me tell you something. I'm laying down the rules here. I'm the Pope. I'm the general. If just one person, I'm just hoping and praying, and here's my rules. And if one person violates my rules, I hope one of you guys violate my rules. I will crush you so hard that nobody will ever dream of it again. Everybody's like, oh my God. His buddy, Bob Davis was his assistant. And I'd be in the office, and he'd go, just a minute, Garland. He'd open the door. God damn it, Davis. Get in here right now. I'm sick of this crap. Bob Davis would come and he closed the door and says, hey, grab a cup of coffee. And we sit there and drink coffee for a while and talk and tell some jokes and talk about the Orioles game. And you go, all right. And you open the door. Davis, if you ever say another word like that, your ass is fired. Out of here. Davis was like, yes, sir, right? It was all a fraud. But here's my point. He was just chilling everybody, making sure everybody knows. Don't try to, oh, he's tough. Don't mess with the superintendent, to say chief of police. He's a scary guy, right? That's this game. You take something minor. The reason they're going after these people is because what's the most minor thing we can find and wipe somebody out, throw them out of the country. That way, if you even think about marching down the street with an anti-Zionist sign, you'll be like, holy shit, if they did that to that little person. Do you see what I'm saying? That's the absolute intent of it.
Yeah, exactly. It's intimidatory. It's bullying. It's high level bullying. They're trying to get everybody to say, if you're a student at Tufts, where that girl had written that article in an op-ed, as you say, a very moderate one, or at Columbia, or Fordham now has expelled some kids, or the ICE has taken them away, cancel their visas. If you're in a kid in American kid in that university, you got to start saying, this is like Julian Assange. You got to start saying, am I going to say something? What's going to happen to me if I say something like this? Am I at risk? You got to stop. They want everybody to be thinking twice and three times and self-censoring, because they saw what they did to you saw what they did to that person. Maybe they'll find a way of doing it. And they're saying, the woman yesterday, I don't know who it was. It wasn't Pam Bondi. It was one of his press spokeswoman. Oh yeah, we are thinking of whether we can deport American citizens. We're looking into that, whether we can legally deport American citizens.
So remember when they were saying they wouldn't hire? They were like, yes, if you graduate, we're sending out letters to all of these law firms saying don't hire. Now, you've gone to school for 4 years, you have the amount of years, and now you decide to go to law school. You're in your second year of law school. You're going to graduate. You put all this time in, and you go, oh, I think I'll do this. Maybe I'll be a law professor. Maybe I'll practice law. Oh, I'm going to do whatever, right? You're now thinking, crap. If I make one mistake, all of this work and time I've done and my whole future is blown, and they'll throw me out of law school and they'll write letters to nobody. You see what I mean? The intimidation of people, of students, to just keep
that was all there. But this is now the government saying, we're going to throw you out of the country, or we're going to put you in jail. And they want to intimidate everybody. They want to stop this anti-Zionist movement from growing, and they want to try and crush it. And the answer to that is, I'm sorry, I hate, I understand everybody has to make their own calculus about what to do about that in their lives, in terms of what position they are in their lives and what kind of risks they want to take. But this will not be defeated unless it is defied, strongly defied. Okay, 100%. I do not accept. And I've said it in my article, and I'll say it here publicly. I do not accept that I cannot support. I do support the armed resistance of, name the group, from the Hamas to PFLP to the other. It's not any particular group. I support armed resistance to Zionism. Okay, and I will not be intimidated by being told that's a support for terrorism.
International law. How about this?
Nelson Mandela was defined by the United States as a terrorist until 2008. If I supported the ANC in 2007, I was supporting what the American government called terrorism. I have the right,
international
as an
law,
citizen, to support politically what the United States government defines as terrorism.
International law, Jim. International law.
I know.
Says clearly that an occupied people have a right to fight the occupation in any manner they determine. And the Houthis argue, the Yemenis argue, they say that the International Criminal Court has found reasonable suspicion and or probable cause, however you want to however they stated in international law, that a genocide is being committed, and therefore
that's right.
The law says all countries must, not must, or shall do whatever they can to mitigate it, right? So if I say, well, look, international law, regardless of what, even if I didn't support the groups that are fighting them, let's say I knew nothing about it. If I looked at it and said, let me interpret the law, even the UN has ruled that this is an illegal occupation, right? The UN has ruled that it's illegal occupation. International law says you can resist an illegal occupation by force of arms. I'm sorry, regardless of whose side I am, I have to say this is legal, and I can support the legal side. That's his international law. Oh, they found that there's suspicion or reasonable or evidence of a genocide, and this country has decided to say, I'm going to act in accordance with my interpretation of international law. I look at it and I say, I think their international law interpretation is correct. They're doing the right thing. But you're going to tell me in my country it's terrorism, and even though I'm looking at international law, well, let's think about this though. We're talking about a rogue state, a state in the United States that literally in 2003 passed a law called the Hague Invasion Act that said if the Hague brings American military personnel or American citizens to the Hague to prosecute them or hold them for violation of international law, the U.S. military can then go in and attack the Hague. So basically what they're saying is this: we don't care about international. It's like the mafia, right? It's like the neo-Nazis. It's like the Zionists. And what they say is this: we don't care what the law says. In the end, we will use arbitrary and capricious acts of violence to enforce our own version of the law. And all we're saying is we don't agree with that. I'm an anti-violence person, but I respect the law. And if the law says if you do this, a person can resist it with violence, that's the law. Don't get mad at me. As Malcolm X said, if the truth is anti-American, don't blame me, blame the truth.
Yep.
But we can't even recognize international law without being called terrorist supporters and facing God only knows what as American citizens.
Yeah. Look, the American government, but this is what, again, Trump is working on principles and on policies that the groundwork has been laid. It was the Biden administration.
Nobody was worse than Obama.
To define domestic terrorism.
Nobody was worse than Obama.
That's right.
Nobody was worse than Obama.
Yeah. But in terms of domestic terror, the term domestic terrorism as a kind of policy framework for the American police organizations, FBI, et cetera, was formalized in the Biden administration. I remember the list of things that count for domestic terrorism were the most asinine, ecological, things, et cetera.
Anything they said.
Being anti-capitalist in some way.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah,
it said if you were anti-capitalist, you could be considered which is, again, that's First Amendment protected speech.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is, what the Trump administration is saying, Rubio gets up, look, and unfortunately, legally, he probably has the ground for this for non-citizens, for people here on visas. We decide what's terrorism. We make decisions about what's terrorism. And then we can go apply those decisions to people, and make people agree with our decisions about what's terrorism. This is the point. Nobody has to agree. No American they can say, we define what's a terrorist organization, and we will punish you for materially supporting that terrorist organization, for sending them guns or money or whatever. That's arguably a position they can take. They can't say we define this organization or this group of organizations or this political movement as terrorist, and you, as an American citizen, are not allowed to support them. No, they can't say that, whether they're right or wrong in calling them terrorists. Okay, and I'll say it again: Yitzhak Shamir, Menachem Begin, the Prime Minister of Israel, defined himself as the father, quote, the father of terrorism in the modern world. Yitzhak Shamir, who was the Prime Minister of Israel, wrote an article called "Terror," in which he said terrorism is not anathema to Jewish values or ethics, and terrorism is something that we have to do if we need to do it. So you can rightly or wrongly define certain people as terrorism. Maybe Menachem Begin is a terrorist. Maybe Nelson Mandela was a terrorist. I can support them politically. I can say I support their cause and I support their fight in relation to the people they're fighting against, in relation to the white South African apartheid regime. and you could support the Zionist terrorists in relation to whatever, the British or the Palestinians, and I can support the Palestinians in relation to the Zionists. So whether you call them terrorists or not, and we have to stand up for that. Otherwise, the government can define things the way it wants, and it can punish you for certain kinds of actions in relation to those things. It can't punish you for speaking up in ways that it doesn't like in support of organizations that it defines as terrorist or stupid or, Martian or whatever they define them as.
Well, here's an example, just something to make people not trust me. So when I was in law enforcement, I still, in the early 2000s after 9/11, they started doing all of this terrorist stuff, and they assigned me. I started working for the governor's office, and I was taking the lead in Maryland on all these, put on the special task force for terrorist stuff. So we started getting all of this training regarding terrorism, right? One of the training that I got was on VBIEDs, vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices, car bombs, just to show everybody. And the guy that taught us was a retired CIA guy, right? So nobody trusts me. I'm a CIA operative, obviously, because I learned from car bombs. But we had to read this book called Buddha's Wagon, A Brief History of the Car Bomb. And when you read that, they go on to say, Mike Davis traces its worldwide use and development, the car bomb in the process, exposing the role of state intelligence agencies, particularly those of the United States, Israel, India, and Pakistan in globalizing errors. So basically, what you end up finding out is the car bomb came from Zionist terrorist group. But where it started was, the reason they called it Buddha's Wagon, a guy whose last name was Buddha, back in like the 18 somethings or whatever, or 1910, I remember, forgot what year it was. September 1920, an angry Italian anarchist named Mario Buddha exploded a horse-drawn wagon filled with dynamite in Iron Strat near New York's Wall Street. It was a guy who was pissed at Wall Street who bought a wagon, and that was the first car bomb. Okay, the Zionist Israeli groups decided to start using that, and then it came back over here, and that's how the so-called Islamicists started using the car bombs. So what people don't know, the whole concept of car bombs, though it started with that, people forgot about that. The Zionist groups in the 40s, etc., they're the ones that really perfected terrorism. And as you said, they were outright open about it. Terrorists. They attacked a hotel, killed a bunch of Brits. I mean, you could go on and on and on. But that part of America, that part of history is hidden. You know what? I always say this: if Americans knew the history, if they knew about the CIA being in Ukraine since the 40s and 50s, the MI6 there, pumping up to and supporting these neo-Nazis, building that to go against, you know what I mean? So one of the things about our ruling elite is they have to hide and dumb down reality to people. I was talking to a woman, diehard Democrat, and I was saying to her, well, look, the U.S. overthrew the government of Ukraine in 2014, and she had this horrified look on her face, and she was going, you know what I mean? It was a look that says, no, don't say that. That will screw up everything I believe. No, oh my God, no, back you feed. You know what I mean? This delusional, and now I look, to be honest, I'm a former Democrat, okay? So I'll say this about the Democratic Party, both parties are horrible. The level of delusion, the level of it's just both of them are this, but I'll address the Democratic Party for a moment or two from you. I don't even call it a party. I call them both brainwashed cults. But the things that I hear from I said this during COVID. I said, what we're dealing with here is a fundamental issue. People who trust the government and think they're looking out for their best interest. And I said, during COVID, those of us who don't, 9/11, those of us who don't trust the government and think they're looking out and instead see them as liars and criminals and terrorists and warmongers, 9/11, COVID, they're like, yes, the government said this. I'm like, well, then I know that's not true, right? And now when it comes to Ukraine, well, Putin did this or that. And why do you believe that? Because the government told you that? Well, that's how I know it's untrue. And this concept in the Democratic Party, despite being lied to everything about COVID, everything they lied to him about. We find out they just made stuff up, you know, whether it's 6 feet or whatever. And that it got through to some people. It woke some people up, but a lot of people it didn't get through, and they're still like, oh, they're telling us the truth about Ukraine. Jim.
Yeah, well, you know, look, during the Bush years, a lot of people did cotton to the fact that they're just the government lying to us. This is a bunch of bull about WMDs, et cetera. We got ourselves into a war. So there was, but unfortunately, you know, I'm too old. I was jaded and cynical before that. But, you know, a lot of people became, the present generation of activists, et cetera, became radicalized during the Bush years. And then again, with Obama, they thought, look, this is an important thing. It was an important thing. The election of a black president is historically amazing and important. I mean, I did not.
In theory,
I did not believe him. I did not vote for him, and because I knew, you know, I was already too cynical and jaded. But it was an important thing, and he had a great persona and a great attitude. And it seemed like, okay, we're going to get back again. We're going to make America great again. Really, we're going to make America virtuous again. We're going to make it virtuous again. Blah 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 blah. And look, people also thought, and this is the most important thing, that he's going to stop the wars and he's going to do something for the working class. People voted for him. I mean, the conditions for the election of Donald Trump was the failure of Obama. Obama came in a condition under which people were ready for socialism. They were ready for certainly a public health care policy, at least. They were ready for things. And he came in and deliberately, and it wasn't because of Republican opposition. He had a supermajority veto-proof Congress. He stopped. He didn't want health care. He put it into it. He deliberately pushed this Mitt Romney right-wing agenda, which is subsidizing private health insurance. He cut away. He cut down. He refused to punish stop the wireless surveillance and punish the people who had done it.
He punished the whistleblowers.
and the social economy got worse. The position of black people in the economy as a whole got worse. The inequalities grew and grew and grew, and he set the conditions. He allowed. He had a policy which was designed not to interfere with the capitalist acceleration of inequality. And that's why people started voting for people like Donald Trump. And because 1,000 state legislative seats were gone from the Democrats to the Republicans because the Democrats failed, and they won't acknowledge their failure. And then they just lied about everything. I mean, the Biden administration was a complete set of lies about everything, including the fact that he was non-compos mentis. And they not only lied about it, they attacked the people who tried to talk about it and made them anathema and censored them, etc. People are furious about that. So yeah, I don't want people to go back to the Democrats. The Democrats deserve the derision and the disrespect that they have. And but you know, we have to be able to think something different. And I think Trump is going to come in and save him, and he's not going to do any. I mean, look, they'll find out very quickly. Trump is going to be despised as much as the Democrats are quickly, and it's true. I mean, the problem is they also made Trump into a hero. You know, if they had left Trump, his first term, Trump was no big deal in certain respects. What happened was between the first and the second term, they tried to put him in jail 58 different times. They made him
radicalized him to some extent.
He comes in, he says, "Now I'm going to get you guys," and he is. He said, "What are you going to do?" So what do you expect? And you told the American people that Donald Trump is a dangerous anti-establishment guy who's going to come in and revolutionize the country. So they believe that. He's not an anti-establishment. He's a dangerous
But you know what
guy.
that did too? That gives him now the political cover to do this radical, crazy, really super neoliberal stuff and neocon stuff, you know, by saying he's going to do something radical. And people were like, well, this place is a disaster. We want something radical. So he comes in and they're like, there's an expectation of radical. So when he says, oh, I'm going to bring, jobs back by doing this, people are like, well, it seems kind of crazy, but maybe it'll just work. I don't know. We don't know. Maybe, you know what I mean? Because they set the stage for that. And what do they do? They go out.
Because people are believing in this false economic nonsense. We're going bankrupt. Yeah, we do have to
Yeah.
cut everything. We've got to cut government spending. That's the way we get back to normality and to economic rationality, by cutting spending, cutting spending, cutting spending. People believe that stuff. Democrats and Republicans. The Democrats all said it. Nobody told us more often during his career that you have to cut Social Security and Medicare.
Remember Bill Clinton?
Joe Biden.
Remember
Nobody.
Bill Clinton? Bill Clinton, the era of big government. Bill Clinton said that the era of big government is over. He fired 377,000. You know what I mean? The Democrats have bought into, not just bought into, in some ways, they're the foundation of neoliberalism. Neoliberalism is the Democrats do it with a smile, the Republicans do it with a scowl. You know what I mean? There are different parts. The Republicans' job is the austerity part. The Democrats, so the Republicans do the maximum austerity. Let's get rid of the social safety net. And the Democrats go, bring us back in and we'll get rid of the Trump tax cuts. They don't do it. Bring us back in and we'll get rid of the...
They'll do a little. They'll do a little back.
Well, remember this? Bring us back in. We'll get rid of the Bush tax cuts. Trump signs them. Obama signs them into permanency. When elect me,
he had to sign it. He could have just. They were going to expire.
Yep. He didn't have to do nothing. Remember, they used the term fiscal cliff. Bring me in. I'm Joe Biden, and I'll get rid of the Trump tax cuts. You're going to get rid of the Trump tax cuts? Well, because that's their side of the game. You play this side of the neoliberal street. The Republicans say play that side of the neoliberal street. We'll all come together for Zionism. We'll all come. Trump, remember this. I'm thinking about an 8%. I want Peter Hegseth to tell me how we can get rid of 8% of the Pentagon budget every year for the next 4 years. Oh, Trump's going to get rid of 32%. What did they say? We're increasing it by $133 trillion. More that we got to lay all these people off. Workers. We got to lay off federal workers. Why? It's too expensive. We can't. And I kept saying, I don't care how much they save for federal workers. They will spend more than that in their increase to the federal government. So now you're laying off the ma and pa who put their kids through school and buy a home and a car and a minivan or whatever the hell. They just do normal stuff. That money is going out of the government's hands into working families. I don't care what you think of what they're doing or not, but it's going out into the economy. They're buying big screen TVs and things like that. You take that money and what do you do now? That money will now be spent on the military industrial complex. And as you know, military hardware is inherently inflationary. When you build a bomb, you can either store it or blow it up. That's it. When ma and pa get that money and they go down, they're buying soccer balls, which you're going to wear out. They're putting gas in their car. They're going to vacation in Disney World. They're doing things where the money goes into the economy and recirculates. But no, Trump, it was just lies all the way down, just like Biden. Remember Biden? Oh, we're going to do a public option. We're going to do increased minimum wage. We're going to free college. The same exact thing from both parties. They both play their side of the street.
It's good cop, bad cop.
Now it's bad cop, worse cop.
Exactly.
It's Zionist cop, genocidal cop. Hey, well, Jim, we're just about out of time. Tell everybody where they can find all your stuff again.
Okay, best place to find me is at the Polemicist, my Polemicist Substack, at the Substack, Jim Cavanagh's Substack. I'll have everything up there, my videos and my articles, and Twitter at the Polemicist _.
All right, follow
me. Please like and visit my Substack. Subscribe for free. Everything I post everything for free. Although paid subscribers get advance notice, advanced access, and I'm happy to have as many subscribers as I can. So if you like what you hear, come over and subscribe to my Substack.
Awesome. Everything you guys see everything going across the bottom there. But follow me over there at Substack, Rockfin, and Rumble, and Telegram. And if you can afford to donate, that's certainly appreciated. Even if you can't, that doesn't matter. Share this on all your social media platforms. That's what's important. Thanks a lot. We're out.
Bye-bye.